Welcome to DAPS Magic Live. I'm Mr. DAPS, and I'm joined today by...
Deafening silence.
Yes. Ladies first. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Katie.
I'm not.
That is true. That is Cameron. And today we thought we would address the big news of the week, which is that the Disneyland Resort and the Walt Disney World Resort will be closed indefinitely. And I think this was not surprising news, but it was also met with an element of surprise. Is that a weird way to put it? But do you guys get what I'm saying? Where I think we all knew this was coming, but kind of lots of people hoped in the back of their minds that this wouldn't happen, and that things would just magically be better. My first thought is, or question is, for each of you, and Katie, you can go first. What was your thought when you heard that the parks domestically were closed indefinitely?
So my first thought was indefinitely rats, because I was kind of hoping for more of like a hard deadline, like Knott's did.
Like May
I understand
15th or something.
Yeah, I understand why they didn't, because I think that they would much rather give themselves the flexibility and the room to change, because we really don't know at the end of the day how long this is going to go, and you don't want to project over and be wrong, and you don't want to project under and disappoint more people. But yeah, my first thought was definitely, oh, indefinitely.
How about you, Cameron?
Again, I mean, if you go back and watch Geeks Corner, which is every Tuesday night at 9:30 at thegeekscorner.com, you will see that certain members of our team may have predicted roughly this timeline for them to come out with a general indefinite announcement. Just putting that out there. Yeah, I mean, it's disappointing, but Disney is very much playing the chess game that is inter-theme park relationships. They've seen other people predict hard deadlines with a little bit of variability, so they are giving themselves the flexibility to be correct no matter.
Yeah, I think they're totally doing that. And there's this fine line they have to walk between safety and sustainability of the company, and they're going to try to trim that sail as tight as they possibly can so that they can maintain safety of cast members and guests while also get back in business as quickly as possible. And I'm assuming they're also looking at other ways that they can be capitalizing on what's going on, whether it's through Disney Plus or digital downloads. Maybe not necessarily move the dial really far forward, but try to redeem some of the revenue that's being lost right now. If you were to make any sort of prediction, when do you think parks will be back?
So I wrote an article yesterday on dapsmagic.com about shades of green on Walt Disney World Resort, and they are closed until May 15th.
Yep.
I'm saying if the U.S. government, because that is owned and operated by the Department of Defense, if they're closing something until May 15th, I'm going to maybe say May 15th. So mid-May somewhere.
Okay, that's your prediction. Cameron, what do you think?
Yes.
I think we are going to see a June 15th opening, or whatever the closest for Friday is in that time. In fact, here, let me pull up an exact date so that we can track these things and I can be right later.
Please do.
May, June. We're looking at June. I'm going to say between 12th and 19th. I'm going to say let's say June 12th.
Wow. June 12th.
And as to why, so everything is predicting middle of May. Katie pointed out most governmental agencies are choosing that. If we're looking at the trends around the world of people who followed our general curve line for this, it's roughly a month over expectation, which carried it out to about 8 weeks rather than 4 when they started putting restrictions on. So that would put us about on the same timeline.
About for that June 12th
Correct.
area. And you might not be far off, because what I've been doing is watching the overseas parks mostly and wondering how long it is going to take them to return to operations. And yes, you have Disney Town open at Shanghai Disney, but there's not a whole lot happening over there. And I think you're probably closer than any of us would like to admit, if not on the um, hopeful end of things. um, but the big unknown really is what is like we're gonna know in the next few weeks what it's gonna look like further down the road, just because we don't know what technology is gonna do here in the United States. We don't know what that curve is gonna look like, and that really could change things much later, or maybe even earlier if we're lucky. My question is how do you think? So let's say the parks are closed. Best guess by everybody's mark, it's 2 months, right? Is that a fairly safe assessment from all of us?
More or less.
Yeah, more or less. So parks are closed for 2 months. That's 2 months of income the parks aren't getting. That's 2 months of action that the parks aren't having happen. Maybe even 2 months of not having construction happening in them, if that's the way it's working out. How do you think when the parks reopen, one, what is it going to be like? And two, how do you think it's going to impact the future of the parks? So let's ask first, what do you think it's going to be like returning to the parks? Is there going to be new procedures in place? What do you think?
Think about new procedures.
Well, I'm betting that, like, to go along with new procedures, I'm betting that there's going to be thermal scanning at walk-ins. There's already been a bit of this at theme parks, but I think they're going to be public with it now, which is to say they are taking your temperature the same way they're checking for metal when you walk through the security checkpoints. Anything that spikes as a high fever will probably immediately go into testing. And I'm betting that Disney will have happy, friendly coronavirus testing on site.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if it happens because they already have the basics to do it for a lot of other ailments. If you're ever interested in something really fascinating, look into the medical availability at Disney. There is an impressive amount, more than you would think. Not counting stuff that can get there very quickly. But I would not be surprised if on the front line there is some kind of symptom check in the form of a thermal scan will probably be the easiest way. I don't think we're going to be doing mouth swabs going through or anything like that. Which, by the way, also horrifying. Look how they test for COVID-19. It involves a deep nasal Q-tip that looks like it's itching the back of your brain. It's unpleasant. Yep. Stay indoors. Yep. But a thermal check would be reasonable, and at that point, secondary testing for those who are wanting admittance. I also see a bit of a rewrite in the entrance requirements. We already have a lot of the same stuff that you would see at like an airport, as far as these are the things you can't bring in, and then there's some industry specific stuff in the form of these are the size of strollers you can't bring in. I could see language going into the section about public behavior, like public drunkenness in a Disney park or that kind of thing, where they're also going to add a line about no obvious signs of ailment without proper testing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Katie, what do you think is going to change when they come back?
Well, okay, first of all, we were talking about medical stuff at Disney. As someone who's passed out on property, they gave me orange juice. Like, they're great. Also, I passed out because I had given blood. Please, no one think that I was just passing out at Disneyland for fun.
Teacups, man, they're brutal.
I would see something similar, especially with the rewriting of security policies of not coming in if you have visible signs of ailment. Just because I think that is a good idea anyway. I've seen way too many people come to not only Disneyland, I've seen it at Knott's Berry Farm, Universal Studios, Six Flags, wherever, people that should not be outside that feel obligated to come to a theme park because their family had plans or what have you. But I've seen way too many people, like, middle of July, bundled up in coats and, like, they have, like, the face because they're so sick. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something like that come to fruition. I think that'd be very smart.
it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Just how they enforce it in a hospitable way.
Yeah.
And I assume it'll actually be a mix between what you see with their current medical teams, which is amazing, mixed maybe with a little bit of security practices as well, which are also equally amazing. And it's kind of interesting to see if you're really watching how many things happen on any given day at Disney that probably 99% of the guests at the park have no clue what's going on. And it's if you're looking for it, it's there, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think one of the other things that probably will happen when we are able to return to the Disney parks is I think you're going to see a ramped up a much quicker ramping up of the virtual queue system. They've already used it for Rise of the Resistance. I would not be surprised at all if you see them implementing it in other places to try to spread people out a little bit more. And I don't know how fast they can actually do that, but I think you could make it happen in places like Dumbo's popping in the top of my head, where you could basically go to a fast pass system, and this is when you come back, and they can spread the line out a little bit more that way, as opposed to cramming in however many hundreds, if not thousands, of people that they cram into that queue. But I think we will see a more concerted effort to spread people out more. The interesting thing, I think, really will come down to parades, fireworks, shows, where people naturally end up crowding into each other, Fantasmic being a good example, and close to each other. And will that just be a continue, this is how we do business, just be careful, or will it be something that they change their practices on moving forward? And part of that will depend on how this outbreak is dealt with and where it's at when the parks reopen. Anybody have any thoughts on those?
I think it's an opportunity for further courtesy if they really want to implement certain practices that will be doubly beneficial, in that they would be preventative of certain issues like crowding, but also create value for people. For example, I would not be surprised if we see a new system of seating for fireworks and Fantasmic that involves a rapid Disney magic only kind of way of putting out an exceptional amount of seating all the way down Main Street, 15 minutes before fireworks. If that just became this, wouldn't that be amazing if they had a system in place of just cast members that were specifically on crowd control for that in the same way they have been, but their job is nobody can congregate before the fireworks. 15 minutes before, here come these massive rollouts of seats into roped off areas, and they drop the ropes and everybody can sit down. It would automatically spread people out a bit. Also, it'd be just a really cool option. I could see them doing things like that that kind of require people to distance and take away the need to crowd.
And I'm immediately thinking of Candlelight as you're speaking about this, and I'm just like, oh yeah, they've done this before. That's an interesting idea. I'd be curious to see how they can pull that off, which they can pull off anything if they want to with enough money and manpower. But that would be really an interesting thing to see happen. Katie?
I think they have done a fantastic job implementing virtual queue for Rise of the Resistance. So I don't underestimate Disney on their ability to come up with things and fit people in places that they're not necessarily able to. I have a feeling that there's a lot of management right now probably talking about a lot of things on how can we make all these people disappear and still welcome them into our parks. I personally have no idea. But I also never saw something like the virtual queue for Rise working. So I love it. I love virtual queue. Please don't take me as one of those people that hates virtual queue. But I am very open to being completely surprised whenever the parks reopen on some genius idea that I never thought of.
Okay. I think that's totally true. I think you're both probably in the right track. It'll be interesting to see. I could even see them doing a virtual queue for certain areas of Main Street and maybe not going full on chairs, but instead going, you've got this section of Main Street that we're going to put 40 people in, and that just allows people to spread out more. Or I don't know. There's lots of different things that they could do. Odds are with Disney, they've thought of something that we didn't even think about. And the other thing that we aren't thinking about is, or considering as we're talking about this, is the possibility that the parks just aren't as full when they reopen, mainly because people are afraid of what could be. And the only reason I'm even remotely bringing this up is I do remember after 9/11, it took a while for people to get comfortable coming back to the parks. And so let's say you get a 50% dip in traffic that's coming into the parks. That would be a huge difference in your day at Disneyland or Walt Disney World. And so there is that possibility that when we do come back, there's just not going to be as many people, and that could change things as well. Interesting couple things going on in the chat. I saw the finger scanners brought up at Walt Disney World. Do we think they'll continue to use those? Very quickly, Cameron, and then Katie, do you think they're going to keep using finger scanners in Florida?
Not when there's easy access to barcode scanning and
the face thing?
Remote scanning. Yeah,
I think so too. I think they can probably come up with an efficient way that can speed up. Their process is faster than Disneyland's, and I'm sure they'll come up with something that's better than both. What do you think, Katie?
No, I can see it going away. Again, it is already quicker than Disneyland's. And there should be pretty easy ways to verify in the system who's coming in besides fingerprint scanning. So I could see it going away.
Okay. The other thing is what do you think the process will be for bringing back cast members? Because obviously it's not going to just be a like, hey, we're opening on May 15th, June 12th, or July 17th. Everybody just show up. Like, one of the things I'm starting to wonder about is at some point you're going to have to get re-signed off on some of these attractions. I'm thinking of some of my friends over at Jungle Cruise. Like, I know if they don't do the attraction for a certain amount of time, they lose their knowledge, for lack of a better term, and they're going to have to regain that knowledge. What do you think that, like, how, I mean, the first step is they're going to bring some level of management that's currently not there back into the parks, I'm assuming. Second step is going to be bringing in the rank and file cast members, and then they're going to do a bunch of stuff, and then it comes to guests. What do you think that process is going to look like?
I think it's going to be a 2-week process. I think that they're going to get an opening date, and then for 2 weeks before, they're going to start bringing people back in. They're not going to have, it's not going to say, we open on July 17th, and on July 16th, we have everyone come back in and remember everything. I think they would do things in phases. So I'm thinking specifically going through a week of different departments, like entertainment works this day and gets all of their re-brushing up, and then attractions and food and beverage and all those things, basically, for lack of a better term, blowing the dust off some things and getting everything working again. Honestly, I was thinking, because in my line of work, we were talking about coming in 2 days before when we're expected to reopen, mainly because we have to get machines working again, because things will shut down if they are not used every single day. So getting things back working again. And I think those attractions specifically are going to have to go through quite a few cycles getting warmed back up after sitting dormant for a while.
Mm-hmm. Cameron, what do you think?
I agree with Katie, except not 2 weeks. I bet you it's going to be 3 days. It is going to be 3 days of the entire park being open and running as per normal, and the only guests that are allowed in are other cast members. They're going to do a cast member exclusive few Disney days. They're going to pitch it as, thank you for going through this difficult time. Now to get us back into it, cast members are welcome.
Totally.
They're going to be giving away some free stuff to the cast members in the form of food and drink. And they will have 3 days.
Make it anyway.
Yeah. And they're going to have 3 days of blowing the dust off of everything. Well, during that time, everyone gets a day or two back on employ.
I think that's a very possible thing. I'm just curious. Like, I don't know off the top of my head how long it is before you lose knowledge for something. So if that becomes a case, I feel like then it
6
takes
months.
longer. It's what?
It's
6
variable.
months.
Okay.
Some attractions it's 2 months. Some of the mind you, this is all tertiary information. I never worked attractions at Disneyland, but I know there's some attractions that are much more intricate that I think roll off after 2 months.
I'm sure something like Indiana Jones or something.
Something like that.
Yeah. Well, that'll be really fascinating to see how that plays out. I don't actually have any prediction on how that's going to play out because this is where all of those laws of unintended consequences are going to come right to the forefront, and they're going to find themselves. I mean, this is an unprecedented thing they've never had to deal with before to this level. So it's weird to think of 2 empty parks sitting just down the road from us for literally months, and if it's anything like the cars, if you don't run them for a while, they tend to not be so happy with you. So it'll be interesting to see how that reopening process goes and how long it takes.
Speaking of which, if you own a vehicle, go out and start it. It's one thing nobody's talking about with all this fun stuff. I really hope everyone's staying safer at home. But much like Disneyland's going to need to start things back up, it's going to be a little rough. Every week, at least go turn on your car. Please go turn on your cars.
I am curious how that works with electric vehicles. Like, I haven't had an issue, but I'm like, I wonder how long I can go without turning it on if it's plugged in. Anyway, let us know in the comments if you know. Yeah, I know.
You can ask someone.
I know, but
it's more fun to get.
Exactly. Cameron's totally right on this one.
No.
So they've also tentatively said, without actually making a hard date, they've also set a target date, it looks like, in the way they released it, for Tokyo Disney to come back on April 20th, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And do we think this date is going to be anywhere remotely close to actually happening? Or is this a pipe dream?
I think it is possible because of the government structure around it. The main difference between American Disney parks and the others is the choice of freedoms versus social obligation.
Yeah.
For one part, the countries where the other Disney parks are, for better or worse, have a little bit more social respect than Disney does, or American Disney does.
Yeah.
And for another part, the governmental structures over them can enact a lot more oversight as to what they are
allowing,
forcing their population to do and allowing as far as public view. It is the benefit and detriment of being in America. The downside is that for the most part, we can do whatever we want, and too many people will take advantage of that.
I think you're absolutely right. Katie?
I think that it's possible. I think that we could see it happen. We've seen the curve flatten quite a bit there, which is, I think, a good thing. But going back to the policies we were talking about, I think that if we see anything change, we're going to see it happen there first.
I think it'll be more dramatic there than it'll be here. Whatever they get will probably be more than what we get, just because they tend to be able to get away with that, just as Cameron was saying. When do you think Shanghai or Hong Kong are going to reopen? Just to make a guess.
Shanghai May 1st.
Really?
I could see it happening 2 weeks after. Hong Kong, I think it's more complicated of an issue because it's not just COVID-19 going on in Hong Kong.
Okay.
There's also the protests.
Cameron,
there's also vampires. I forgot.
I forgot about the vampires. How did you
forgot about the vampires?
Hong Kong?
Garlic bread for everyone at the front gate. Security precaution.
By the way, have you guys been reading Murray's tweets?
About zombies?
About the zombies. I don't know why that just triggered, but they are absolutely hilarious. It was first zombies and then robots, and I think they're back to zombies. But
zombie cyborgs, that's the next step. Nobody tell them.
Yeah. Don't trust the zombies.
Here's what I predict. I don't know an exact date. I'm going to guess middle of May.
Okay.
But my prediction is Hong Kong will announce a date, and then Shanghai will announce a date slightly earlier.
I would think so.
the relationship between those two areas of the world and the fact that they both have Disney parks has made for some very interesting design choices in Shanghai and for some procedural choices. I was debating which way it was going to go, but I'm betting it's Hong Kong announces, Shanghai announces earlier.
Well, and then they can use Hong Kong as kind of a testing zone to see how it reacts, and I hate to say sacrificial lamb, but it kind of is. And
it's exactly what Disney's doing with their indeterminate date announcement. They're letting the other parks suffer because what they know is going to happen is Cedar Fair is going to open back up first, I'm betting. Cedar Fair is going to jump on that hill because even if they get 1 week before the other parks open, the other parks can watch for 1 week, and Cedar Fair will get 1 week of profits, which I hate to be so callous about it, but they will take advantage of it. It is a business. Cedar Fair will take advantage of that, and the other theme parks will benefit from watching the petri dish that is those parks.
Yeah, I think you're right on there, and it'll be very fascinating to see once that snowball starts rolling, just how quickly everybody else hops on. My hunch is Disney will be last, but just because they're the only ones that can be last. What do you think?
Possible. No, it's true. Well, Disney can afford to be last. Something that we were kind of discussing the other day is that SeaWorld is in a place where they could not afford to open last.
Do you think there's going to be a SeaWorld after all this?
I don't know.
I don't think we're going to see...
As we know it, no. I don't think we will.
And do you think it's going to be purchased by someone, or is it just going to go away?
Ooh, I didn't think about it being purchased by someone. Well, there's 2? Or are there more?
There's a bunch.
Yeah, there's quite a few, actually.
Oh, I had no
I think
idea.
there's 3 in the United States alone.
Here's my prediction.
Yes.
Here's going crazy interesting.
Your Hail Mary prediction?
Yes.
Okay.
Disney buys SeaWorld.
Really?
They close them for 6 months to a year.
Uh-huh.
Get them all AZA accredited, which is the American Zoological Association.
I like your idea.
Reopen them as aquariums with attractions.
I love that.
Kind of like Busch Gardens-esque.
Yeah, a bit, but even more based on education and experiential.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I also think...
Go ahead.
I think it would be almost better for SeaWorld's reputation. Because even though there have been many people that have come forward ever since the infamous SeaWorld documentary that have said, hey, I work there, it's great, or I don't work there and it's great, there's kind of no saving SeaWorld for a lot of people.
It's about their documentary.
It's an emotional thing. It's not a yeah.
So Disney needs to do another documentary.
Disney Nature does SeaWorld.
Oh no.
So they just give all of SeaWorlds to Joe Rohde, basically, right?
Basically, yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing, Cameron?
That would be interesting. But yeah, you're absolutely. There needs to be an extremely strong rebrand because of the detrimental nature and the lack of understanding there has been around, particularly orcas, killer whales.
Yeah.
I look to the example of like the early 1900s. The biggest sideshow was monkeys. I mean, you've heard of like organ grinders and that kind of stuff. And as our understanding grew through a lot of psychological experiments, Skinner, even though he was testing on monkeys, advanced a lot of that. It's getting way too much of a deep dive and totally off subject. But the point is, around the 50s, we had a much greater understanding of the cognitive intelligence and the capacity for empathy that primates have.
Yeah.
And because of that, our policies changed and our rules changed as far as our perceptions of them. And you don't see people walking around with monkeys and bellboy outfits because we changed. I think that's the growing pains of what's happening right now with SeaWorld's industry, and I think it will continue to exist, just not in the form it has.
I think you have a great idea with Disney purchase. Like, Disney's the only one that could get away with that and do it. The real trick would be if Disney had the ability to pull together the capital after all of their expenditures in the last couple of years, and then what do they got? Like 7.5 or 7.2 billion in debt now. 5 of it from the United States, and then more of it from Canada. And so I'd be curious to see if Disney will be in a position after this, which it very might well be if it's got a strong rebound.
Yeah, but you're talking Disney, the company, so you're talking 7.5 with a B billion in debt. However, with the board, there's a similar number with a T trillion following it as far as their investability.
That is true.
If we're talking business management, the board is going to be motivated to rebound out of this, and you have, as much as the interesting shakeup in structure is right now, Iger is in a prime position on the board for fundraising. If you don't know business structure, one of the main purposes of the board is money, in the sense that they control a lot of money. The reason they can make decisions is usually people on the board are very good with money because they have money. And the Disney board is no different, and they're actually one of the most wealthy boards in the entire world. I would not be surprised if we see a personal capital investment from Disney's board for that or another project similar.
That's an interesting idea. All right, well that went off on a completely different path than we expected when we started this live stream. So as we wrap this up, basically every theme park around the globe is closed right now. There's a few reopening in Japan. We'll see how that plays out a little bit. How long do you think it's going to take to get back to the new normal in the Disney parks domestically once they do reopen? There's my final question.
Katie takes the
I think I was making sure I wasn't muted. I think that when the parks reopen, we're going to see a lot of locals. Don't think we're going to see a lot of tourists, mainly because everyone's getting their vacations canceled. But I think that it'll probably be like 6 months. Like, I feel like maybe around Christmas time we'll see things be
The
normal,
new normal.
quote unquote. But I don't know that we're going to see normal again.
Well, and this is a completely different conversation, but you brought up an interesting point of a lot of locals coming back to Disneyland. This could have a much more severe impact on Walt Disney World, where it is a more tourist-heavy attendance as opposed to locals. And it'll be interesting to see how it changes things down there. Cameron, how long do you think till the new normal?
I disagree with Katie.
Okay.
I think it's going to take a week. And the reason I say that is...
So you don't think people will be scared by anything, and you think they're just going to jump back in?
Everyone's going to have Christmas logic. Which is to say, if you've ever been to Disneyland at Christmas, everyone's logic is, oh, it's Christmas. No one's going to Disney. I'll go to Disney.
Christmas.
And the reason I think it's going to compound is the locals are going to go, oh, it's open. We're local. We might as well take advantage of the lesser crowds from tourists. Tourists are going to say, wow, airfare is lower than it has been in 10 years. Yeah. We're going to take advantage of that before everybody goes back. And the parks are going to be just as packed within a week as they were beforehand. I think the new processes that Disney puts in place, multiple processes, are going to be taking effect, and they're going to be causing some efficiency delays that some people are going to complain about. But no, those parks are going to be packed within a week. I do not underestimate the abilities of people to get bored and cooped up during this time, and I think they're going to jump right back into it unabashedly.
I think you're actually right on, and I think we're going to be shocked at how quickly the parks fill back up against our better judgment. I was originally thinking of 9/11.
It should be what Katie is saying.
Yes.
Katie is an idealist.
Yes. And
I am.
The only reason it would be, like Katie says, is if people's fear outweigh their cabin sickness. And I think you're right on that people are going to have however many months pent up of cabin sickness, and they just want to go to Disneyland and get away from the world. And it's exactly why Disneyland was built in the first place, and it will be fascinating to see how that all plays out. But we will continue this conversation in future DAPS Magic Lives and also Geeks Corner. And make sure to keep your eye on this channel so you don't miss any of them. Also, if you ever want us to cover something, let us know in the comments or on the YouTube page, or you can tweet at us as well, because we'd love to talk about what you'd love to talk about as well. Also, this coming Tuesday on Geeks Corner at 9:30, you guys don't even know this yet, but we will have our good friend Doug Marsh joining us again as he returns to 30 years ago in Disneyland. It'll be his first time on Zoom, it sounds like, so this will be fun. And we will be once again. What do we do? Streaming
Geek
this
here at home.
Yes, we will be streaming from all around Southern California, but we hope you'll join us for that as well. And we look forward to geeking out with you on Tuesday. But have a fantastic weekend, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.